The diesel-scented air hung heavy, thick with the grit of forgotten journeys and the lingering promise of rain. It was 2 a.m. In the truck stop parking lot, a sprawling expanse of asphalt and flickering sodium lights that bled sickly yellow into the ink-black sky. I sat hunched in the cab of my own beat-up rig, the engine off, the silence a fragile shield against the world outside. The world I'd once tried to fix and catastrophically broken. My breath misted against the cold glass, a fleeting ghost. Sleep for me was a luxury rarely afforded and never truly enjoyed. It came in fractured snatches, haunted by the echoing faces of the dead, the whispers of failures that clung to my skin like frost. My hands, once steady on a service pistol, now trembled with a phantom tremor, a memory of the times they'd failed to hold on. A sudden flash of blue and red fractured the yellow gloom. Not a siren, not yet, but the insistent throb of emergency lights blossoming near the far end of the lot. My spine, long accustomed to the slouch of defeat, straightened imperceptibly. An old reflex, sharp and unwelcome. Curiosity, a venom I thought I'd purged, began to prick at me. I swung open the heavy door, the groan of hinges a protest against the quiet. My boots crunched on gravel as I moved, a phantom in the periphery, drawn by the magnet of disruption. 2 cruisers, local county, not the city's finest, had converged on a single vehicle. A refrigerated trailer, its side emblazoned with a generic food distributor logo. Nothing outwardly remarkable. A small knot of uniformed deputies milled about, their flashlights carving paths through the gloom. A driver, a burly man with a face etched by sleepless nights, stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, speaking in hushed, agitated tones to a deputy who scribbled notes on a pad. I edged closer, close enough to catch snippets of conversation, close enough to feel the nascent unease begin to coil in my gut. The air around the truck was still, devoid of the usual frantic energy of a fresh crime scene. No shattered glass, no overturned crates, no bloodstains screaming for attention. Just an unnatural calm, a quiet violation. Didn't hear a thing, officer. Slept right through it. Woke up, went for coffee, saw the seal was broken. The driver's voice, raspy with disbelief. My gaze settled on the truck itself, specifically on the rear doors. The heavy steel bar meant to secure the twin latches was still in place. The padlock, however, was gone, not forced, not cut with bolt cutters. It was simply absent. No shorn metal, no telltale gouges on the hasp. It was as if it had dematerialized. My breath hitched. I moved closer still, circling the perimeter like a hungry wolf. The deputies were focused on the missing lock, on the inventory. They hadn't yet looked at the tires, but I did. The dust, the grime of the road was undisturbed around the wheel wells. Yet a faint, almost invisible residue clung to the hubcaps. Not road grit, something finer. Then I saw it. A sliver of adhesive, no bigger than my thumbnail, stuck to the corner of the license plate. It was a fragment of a very specific kind of industrial strength tape, the kind used for temporary, high-security seals, the kind I'd only ever seen used in a handful of cases. One case in particular. My vision narrowed, the parking lot blurring into a tunnel, all attention fixed on the refrigerated truck. This wasn't the driver's intended cargo, I realized. This was the wrong truck. The driver had pulled in, parked, slept. Someone else had, with surgical precision, identified it, accessed it, emptied it, and slipped away. No alarms, no witnesses, no struggle. Just a ghost passing through. A warehouse years ago. The victims left undisturbed, not a hair out of place, not a single sign of forced entry. The same meticulousness, the same impossible cleanness. They took the whole shipment, the deputy's voice cut through my internal fog. High-value pharmaceuticals worth a fortune. My jaw tightened. Pharmaceuticals, specific, valuable, difficult to move without specialized knowledge, just like the items the killer had sometimes acquired. Not for profit, not directly, but as part of some twisted ritual or to serve some obscure, precise purpose. And no one saw anything. The other deputy asked, shaking his head. In a busy place like this, at 2 a.m.? That was the point, that was his signature, the utter invisibility, the way he could melt into the background, manipulate the environment, make himself unseen. A wave of nausea washed over me. No, it couldn't be. He was gone. I had spent years dissecting every facet of his methods, every clean cut, every impossible entry. This felt too familiar, like a scar aching in a specific kind of weather. It wasn't just a clean heist. It was too precise, too careful, too considerate. The kind of consideration a surgeon gives to a delicate incision or a predator gives to its prey. It wasn't just a memory stirring. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown. He couldn't be back. He simply couldn't. They were looking for a simple theft, a break-in. They wouldn't see the ghost. My hands, though still prone to their phantom tremor, balled into fists. The determination, long dormant, began to stir, a low, dangerous hum in my blood. I hated this feeling, not this time, not when the past was knocking so insistently on the door of the present. The gnawing quiet of the city's underbelly called to me, a siren song laced with rust and forgotten things. I shouldn't have been there, not anymore. My badge was a memory, my reputation a tattered shroud. Yet the whisper from the previous night, the meticulous void left behind, had burrowed beneath my skin like a shard of glass. It demanded my presence, pulled me back to the periphery of a world I'd sworn to abandon. My breath plumed in the frigid air as I parked my worn sedan a discreet distance away, the engine's dying shudder a lonely punctuation mark in the vast silence. The designated nexus of the latest violation was the truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. wrong truck. The official vehicles were long gone, their flashing lights replaced by the dull, persistent hum of distant refrigeration units. Only the lingering scent of disinfectant and the occasional flutter of discarded police tape suggested the recent violation. My gaze, honed by years of sifting through chaos, immediately found the hulking form of the target vehicle. Not the specific rig the manifest had called for, but one eerily similar, a deliberate swap. The wrong truck. Its chrome gleamed faintly under the sparse light, an incongruous gleam for a vessel of such quiet theft. I moved with the practiced stealth of a predator, my steps crunching softly on the scattered gravel, each sound amplified in the profound stillness. I circled the truck, a silent observer charting the geometry of absence. The sliver of tape on the license plate, the detail that had first snagged my attention, was gone, scrubbed clean by the uniformed officers who saw only a routine theft. They wouldn't have understood the nuance, the deliberate act of concealment that preceded the taking. My gloved fingers brushed against the rear cargo doors. No gouges, no bent metal, no splinters of wood. The absence of a forced lock was a gaping canyon in the narrative of a typical heist. This was a ballet of precision, not a smash and grab. I remembered the other scenes years ago, the quiet violence of them, the surgical precision. This felt kindred. I found a slight imperfection on the lower edge of the cargo door, a minuscule scratch, barely visible. Not from a crowbar, but something thinner, sharper, used with the finesse of a craftsman. It suggested a bypass, a key, or a tool designed specifically for this lock. The thief hadn't broken in, they had simply entered. My focus shifted to the ground directly beneath the door. The gravel was disturbed, yes, but in a peculiar way. Not scattered broadly, but pushed aside, almost tidied. A small, flat stone, no bigger than my thumbnail, lay gleaming unnaturally. I knelt, my breath misting, and carefully nudged it with my finger. Beneath it, nestled in the damp earth, was a single, fragile feather, iridescent blue at its tip, fading to a soft gray at its quill. A jay feather. My breath hitched. The detective who'd taken over after my dismissal had dismissed the jay feather as a coincidence. Nature, Cole, he'd scoffed. It's a truck stop. But I remembered. I remembered the first victim, found in an abandoned factory, a single jay feather tucked into the lapel of his jacket. The second near the docks, a feather pressed beneath a discarded pallet. Each time a jay feather. A macabre signature, so subtle, so easily overlooked, dismissed as accidental debris. But not by me. Not by the man who had seen the pattern coalesce only to be ignored. This wasn't just a heist. It was a declaration. A taunt flung across the years meant only for my eyes. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was a deliberate echo. I carefully picked up the feather, its delicate structure surprisingly firm between my gloved fingers. It felt impossibly light, yet carried the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions, 1,000 sleepless nights. My personal stake, once a festering wound, now began to throb with a renewed, terrible purpose. Against every shred of reason, against the bitter taste of my own failure, I knew I couldn't walk away. This wasn't just another case. It was my case returned from the grave. The ghost I thought I'd buried had risen, and it was calling my name. I slipped the feather into a small evidence bag I always carried, a habit from a life I no longer led, yet one I couldn't entirely shed. The cold wind bit at my exposed skin, but a different kind of fire had ignited within me. The investigation, unofficial and fraught with peril, had begun. Yet the whisper from the previous night, the meticulous void left behind, had burrowed beneath my skin, a splinter of glass I couldn't ignore. It was the absence that screamed, the way the air in the ransacked warehouse had felt too clean, too deliberate for a simple smash and grab. A ghost of a method I knew too well, a signature etched in the very lack of chaos. My fingers still tasted of the metallic tang of the air, a phantom sensation of blood and iron, even though no blood had been spilled. Not yet. I had spent the day sifting through the leavings of the last two incidents, not as an investigator, but as a shadow, a phantom myself. The police reports, accessed through a sympathetic, if weary, contact, painted a picture of baffling efficiency. High-value targets, minimal fuss, no witnesses, no struggle, just a clean cut, a precise extraction. The kind of work that required patience, foresight, and a profound understanding of security flaws. The kind of work that felt like a mockery. A discarded receipt from a roadside diner, crumpled beneath a forgotten pallet at the second site, had snagged my attention. A faint, greasy thumbprint on the paper, distinct enough to suggest a hurried moment, a moment of human error in a symphony of perfection. It was an insignificant detail, dismissed by others, but my mind, a rusted lock, had clicked. This wasn't just about the what was taken, it was about the how, and the subtle, almost artistic presentation of the theft. My breath plumed in front of me, a visible marker of my solitary vigil. The diner receipt had led me here to the sprawling expanse of a truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. wrong truck. The diesel fumes hung heavy, a metallic tang that mixed with the faint scent of stale coffee and desperation. 100 behemoths idled, their engines rumbling a low, guttural chorus, vibrating through the asphalt and up into the soles of my worn boots. Each one a potential vessel, a moving vault, a temporary home. I moved with the practiced ease of a predator, my gaze sweeping over the rows of trucks, searching for the anomaly. The receipt hadn't just indicated a diner. It had listed a specific fuel pump, time, and a truck number scrawled in a hasty hand, a number that didn't match the official logs for the cargo it was supposed to be carrying. My contact had provided that morsel, a breadcrumb of data no one else had bothered to follow. And there it was. A flatbed, canvas tarp cinched tight over its load, nestled between two identical rigs, but something was off. The tarp, despite its apparent security, sagged in a way that spoke of recent disturbance. A single, thin strap, almost imperceptible, was frayed at the buckle, a fresh tear against the weathered canvas. I circled the truck, my senses heightened, the prickle of danger a familiar companion. No alarms, no movement, just the relentless thrum of distant engines. My fingers, calloused from years of silent work, traced the frayed strap. It wasn't a casual tear. This was a clean, sharp cut, then frayed by deliberate action, made to look like wear and tear. A signature. The killer had always been meticulous about his exits, his diversions. I aimed it at the buckle, then lower, to the ground beneath the trailer. There, in the faint sheen of spilled oil and rainwater, a tiny shard glinted. I knelt, my knees protesting, and carefully picked it up. A sliver of obsidian, smooth and cool against my skin. Too perfect, too out of place. It was a fragment of a specific cutting tool, one I recognized from the past, a tool designed for silent, precise work. He wasn't just mirroring the methods, he was using the same tools. The wrong truck wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate misdirection, a discarded shell. The world shifted then, the distant rumble of the truck seeming to coalesce into a single ominous sound. My phone, a cheap burner, buzzed in my pocket. A clipped, urgent voice on the other end, my contact's usual calm replaced by a frantic edge. "Cole, it happened again. Bigger this time. A secure transport, almost impenetrable. Vanished without a trace an hour ago just outside the city limits. High-value cargo, government contracted. They think it's an inside job, but the cameras. No forced entry, no struggle, just gone. A secure transport. That was the escalation." My grip tightened on the sliver of obsidian. The killer wasn't just playing, he was demonstrating. He was announcing his return, challenging me directly. I didn't need to be told where the transport had been heading. The cargo manifest, glimpsed briefly through my contact, detailed a shipment of uncut diamonds destined for a heavily fortified vault at the city's central financial district. This wasn't just a heist, it was a statement. A diamond transport vanished in thin air. The sheer audacity, the flawless execution, it was a slap in the face to every security protocol, every law enforcement agency. Before I could reply, another call came through, this one from an unknown number. I answered, my voice a low rasp. "Cole, it's the detective. I was seen near the last two sites, and now this. I wouldn't be poking around, would I? Getting my hands dirty again." The voice was sharp, accusatory, an old wound reopened. It was the detective, a man who had watched my career unravel, a man who saw me as a relic, a stain on the force. "Just taking an interest," I said, my gaze sweeping the silent. Different trucks. The sliver of obsidian felt heavy in my palm. The killer was closer than I thought, and now so were the authorities. The net was tightening, not just around the phantom, but around me. The ghost was calling, and I, the disgraced, was the only one listening. The wind, a razor's edge, sliced through the thin fabric of my jacket, carrying the acrid scent of diesel and stale coffee across the vast, desolate expanse of the truck stop parking lot. 2 a.m. wrong truck. My breath plumed white, dissolving into the inky blackness that swallowed the distant highway lights. Each hum of a sleeping engine, each creak of metal seemed amplified in the pre-dawn hush, a symphony of forgotten journeys. I had been watching, waiting for hours. A shadow amongst the behemoths, my eyes scanning the endless rows of rigs. The intel, whispered by a contact with a debt owed, had been vague: a specific model, a particular route, a subtle modification to the rear axle. My gaze settled on a behemoth, its trailer painted a dull, corporate gray, indistinguishable from 100 others. Yet something about its stance, the subtle tilt of its chassis, snagged at a memory. It was the right type, at least. The kind used for secure, high-value transports. My boots crunched on frozen gravel as I moved, a predator stalking its quarry, though this quarry was merely a steel shell. Closer now, the metallic tang of cold air filled my lungs. I squinted, trying to decipher the faded logo on the cab door, the numbers on the license plate. My hope, a fragile thing, tightened in my chest. Then a slow, deflating sigh escaped me. It wasn't the truck I sought, not the specific plate, not the exact company insignia. Wrong truck, a phantom lead, a wasted night. The frustration was a dull ache behind my eyes. Even in disappointment, my gaze traced the contours of the trailer. Near the rear, just above the mudguard, something caught the sparse light from a distant lamp post. Not unusual, not by itself. But beneath it, almost invisible, was a tiny, precisely etched symbol. A stylized, interlocking pair of gears, no larger than my thumbnail. It wasn't part of the truck's standard branding. It looked like a manufacturer's mark, perhaps, but for what? The gears. I remembered a similar symbol, sketched crudely on a scrap of paper, found tucked into the pocket of a victim from the old case. A detail dismissed then as mere doodling, a throwaway. Now it resonated like a plucked, taut string. I retreated to the sanctuary of my own vehicle, the cheap coffee in my thermos offering little warmth against the growing unease. The interior smelled of stale upholstery and my own gnawing exhaustion. I pulled out the worn folder, its contents a grim litany of past failures and present obsessions. The newspaper clippings, faded and brittle, chronicled the heists. First, the pharmaceutical convoy, vials of a rare synthetic enzyme vanishing without a trace. Then the industrial cargo train, stripped of specific raw earth minerals. And now the secure transport, its contents still under wraps by the authorities, but whispered to be a shipment of specialized microcircuitry, bound for defense contractor. My gaze drifted over the inventory lists, the manifest copies I'd managed to acquire through various channels. Each item on its own commanded a hefty price, but collectively, the pharmaceutical enzyme, the rare earth minerals, the microcircuitry, they didn't fit a standard profile for a fencing operation. The enzyme was volatile, difficult to store. The minerals, while valuable, were niche, and the circuitry was highly specific, almost custom. A flicker of a memory, the old case, the serial killer. His methods, yes, they were mirrored. The precision, the lack of collateral damage, the taunting nature of the disappearances. But the targets themselves, what linked a pharmaceutical, a mineral, and a circuit board? Wait, I muttered aloud, the words swallowed by the quiet interior of the truck. That doesn't add up. The value was there, yes, but the combination was wrong for simple profit. A thief looking for a quick score wouldn't bother with such disparate, specialized components, each requiring unique expertise to extract, unless they weren't being stolen for their individual worth, unless they were components, parts of a larger whole. My mind raced, flipping through obscure knowledge, forgotten articles, a lifetime of observations. The enzyme was a catalyst, the rare earth minerals essential for high-temperature alloys, the microcircuitry for precise control systems. Suddenly, a pattern, faint but undeniable, began to coalesce. Not a pattern of monetary value, but of function. Each stolen item was a critical ingredient, a necessary piece for a complex, highly specialized manufacturing process. A process I vaguely recalled from a lecture years ago, a niche application in advanced material science. Something about synthesizing a new generation of incredibly durable, incredibly lightweight alloys. Alloys designed to withstand extreme conditions. The interlocking gears symbol on the wrong truck flashed in my mind. A manufacturer's mark. For a specialized component, perhaps, this wasn't about money. This was about building something, and then the link to my past, a gut punch that stole my breath. Not just his methods, but him. The details of his life, painstakingly pieced together by my team back then. His meticulous nature. His fascination with precision engineering, with forging, with the creation of something unbreakable. The odd collection of textbooks in his abandoned workshop, filled with diagrams of advanced metallurgy, of extreme pressure and temperature synthesis. He had been obsessed with the idea of perfect creation, of materials that defied destruction. I remembered the chief investigator's dismissive wave, calling it a hobby, an eccentricity. But what if it wasn't? What if it was the core of his obsession? What if the heists weren't just mirroring his methods, but were continuing his work? My hand, trembling slightly, reached for the sliver of obsidian in my pocket, its cool, smooth surface a stark contrast to the burning realization now searing through my mind. He wasn't just announcing his return, he was resuming his project. They were acquisitions, the components for something terrible, something forged from his twisted vision. They was I projecting. They was my guilt over the past case warping my perception, forcing connections where none existed. They was I seeing ghosts in the machinery, in the stolen parts. But the symbol of the interlocking gears, the specialized components, the killer's old obsession, it all clicked with a sickening finality. The heists were building towards a terrifying crescendo. This was a craftsman, slowly gathering his tools, meticulously assembling his masterpiece. And the implications of what he might be building, what purpose such an alloy could serve in the hands of a monster, sent a fresh jolt of grim determination through me. The killer wasn't just demonstrating, he was preparing. And I, standing in the lonely expanse of the truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. wrong truck, finally understood what he was preparing to unleash. The metallic tang of diesel fuel clung to the frigid air, a ghost of endless journeys. My breath plumed, a fleeting cloud against the oppressive ink of the pre-dawn sky. I was a phantom among giants, my borrowed sedan tucked away, almost swallowed by the monstrous chrome and steel beasts that lined the truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. wrong truck. The hum of distant highway traffic was a dull throb, a counterpoint to the anxious drumbeat in my chest. My eyes, raw from hours of straining against the darkness, scanned the rows of sleeping rigs. He was here, I was certain of it. The wrong things. Then I saw it. A familiar silhouette hunched over a steaming cup near the open door of a truck cab, the interior light casting his features in a sickly yellow glow. The hauler. I remembered him from the periphery of the old case, a man who moved cargo, legal or otherwise, for anyone with enough cash and no questions. He'd been a ghost then, too, always slipping away before I could get a solid grip. This time I wouldn't let him fade. As I drew closer, the scent of stale coffee and something else. A faint metallic tang, not diesel, but something sharper, like old blood or fresh solder, reached me. The hauler flinched, the ceramic mug clattering against the dashboard. His head snapped up, eyes wide and bloodshot, reflecting the meager light. He was older, the lines around his mouth deeper, etched by worry or malice, I couldn't tell. Recognition, a flicker of fear, then a mask of weary defiance settled over his face. "Cole, what in the hell?" His voice was raspy, laced with years of cigarettes and suspicion. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Thought I was out of the game. "Some games never end," I countered, stepping fully into the sliver of light. I watched his hands, noting the slight tremor. "Heard I've been working again, moving a particular kind of inventory." He scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "Always moving inventory, Cole. That's what I do. I got a warrant for freight." "No warrant," I admitted, my gaze unwavering. "Just questions about the specific kind of freight, the kind that reminds me of old patterns." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment the fear returned, deeper this time. He glanced around the desolate lot as if expecting company. "Patterns? What the hell are I talking about? I move what I'm paid to move, the precise dimensions, the specialized components. The combination of them, it's not about profit, is it? Not for a simple thief." He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "I res seeing ghosts, Cole, I always did. The old man, the artist, the collector, tell me about the pieces I moving now. Are they for the same grand design? Are they part of the same monstrous puzzle?" His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching near his ear. He looked past me into the gloom. "There's no design, Cole, just orders, a collection maybe, for someone who appreciates the finer things, not like I think. Not like he did. That was it, not like he did. He'd almost given me the name, the original killer. Why these specific, disparate parts? A thief wants cash. This feels like assembling something else." He suddenly lunged, not at me but for the ignition. His hand fumbled for the keys. The movement was clumsy, desperate. I reacted instinctively, grabbing his arm, yanking his back. He cried out, a strangled sound, and lashed out with his other hand. A wild swing that caught my cheekbone, a sharp sting, then the warm spread of blood. "Stay out of it, Cole." He spat, his eyes wide with a different kind of fear now, not of me, but of something unseen. "You don't understand, it's bigger than you think, it's almost finished." "Finished what?" I demanded, tightening my grip. My head throbbed, but the pain only sharpened my resolve. This wasn't just about money. He'd confirmed my suspicion. He struggled, thrashing, surprisingly strong despite his gaunt frame. "He wants to replicate, to perfect it. He's almost got all the pieces." Before I could press him further, a sudden, blinding glare erupted from behind me. Headlights, not the slow, methodical sweep of a passing truck, but a direct, aggressive beam that pinned me in its harsh light. I cursed, momentarily disoriented, my grip on the hauler loosening. He seized the opportunity, twisting violently, tearing free. The engine roared to life, a deep rumble that vibrated through the asphalt. The truck lurched, then began to roll. The blinding headlights behind me advanced, accelerating. I had a split second to decide, chase the hauler or deal with the new threat. The truck behind me was moving fast now, its immense grille filling my rearview. This wasn't a coincidence. I was being run off. I had stepped on something, stumbled into a tripwire I hadn't even seen. I barely made it back to my sedan, throwing myself behind the wheel as the other truck, a monstrous flatbed, roared past, its windblast rocking my smaller vehicle. It wasn't the hauler's rig. It was another, larger, more menacing presence, clearly a diversion, an enforcement. I watched the hauler's truck disappear into the night, its taillights shrinking to pinpricks. My cheek burned, a sticky wetness on my fingers when I touched it. He'd gotten away, and I'd been ambushed, outmaneuvered. The humiliation stung, a bitter taste on my tongue. Replicate, perfect it. He hadn't just been moving cargo, he was helping to build something. Something that mirrored the horror of the past, but what and for whom? Was it the same killer back from the dead, or a devotee picking up the fallen maestro's baton? I leaned my head against the cold window, the throbbing in my cheek a dull counterpoint to the racing thoughts. I had pushed, and something had pushed back hard. My own clumsiness, my predictable pursuit, had cost me. I doubted myself then, a familiar, sickening lurch in my gut. Was I too close, too desperate to see the whole board? Or was I just a ghost chasing a ghost, repeating the same mistakes that had cost me everything before? The sudden, brutal white light ripped through the pre-dawn gloom, searing my vision. For a breath, the world dissolved into a shapeless, burning void. My fingers, still clenched around the hauler's arm, registered a desperate twist, a frantic surge of muscle. He was gone, a phantom dissolving into the periphery of my pain-addled sight. Damn it! I roared, a raw, frustrated sound that vanished into the vast, indifferent expanse of the truck stop parking lot. 2 a.m. wrong truck. My eyes, watering, struggled to adjust as the aggressive beam of the vehicle behind me abruptly cut out, plunging the area back into relative darkness, a cruel echo of the sudden flash. I spun, squinting, trying to pierce the gloom. It wasn't the hauler's rig, not even close. This was too fast, too deliberate. This wasn't a coincidence, nothing. He'd vanished as completely as if the earth had swallowed him. A wave of bitter defeat washed over me, sharp and metallic. I had him, almost. Had the truth within my grasp, only for it to be snatched away by a perfectly timed distraction. It felt too clean, too precise. I stumbled back against the metal flank of the hauler's abandoned trailer, the rough surface biting into my coat. My breath hitched, a ragged gasp. The air was frigid, carrying the faint tang of diesel and stale coffee. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to replay the moment. The hauler's desperate plea, his mention of the money is just a means, and then the sudden tactical blinding light. It was an extraction, not a random interruption. The pieces began to shift, to grind against each other in my mind, forming a new, unsettling pattern. The meticulous planning of the heists, the echoes of the old killer's precise methodology, the way the hauler seemed more terrified of them than of me. It wasn't just about the cash, it never was, not for the original. The money, the jewels, the valuable artifacts, they were just props in a grander, more sinister play. A means to an end. No signal out here, of course. Not reliably. I was alone, miles from anywhere, and the clock was ticking. My mind raced back, not to the current heists, but to the spectral shadow of the past. The one I'd chased through a labyrinth of fear and blood, only to lose him in the fog. He had a signature, a ritualistic element beyond the acquisition of valuables. A specific type of victim always found in a certain tableau, a message etched into the scene itself, though its meaning had always eluded us. The authorities had dismissed it as the ramblings of a deranged mind, but I'd always felt there was more. A deeper, intellectual layer. And then it hit me, a jolt that sent a tremor through my bones. The heists weren't just mirroring the methods, they were completing something. The targets of the heists, not just random caches of wealth, but specific, historically significant items. Each one, I now realized, was connected to a particular victim from the old case. A stolen antique clock, a rare manuscript, a unique piece of artwork. I had dismissed the connections before, seeing them as mere opportunities for theft, but now a horrifying clarity dawned. These weren't just objects, they were tributes, or perhaps sacrifices. The old killer's victims, I remembered with a sickening lurch, had all been collectors, each possessing one of these very items. But the items themselves were never taken from the original crime scenes. It was always the victims' lives, their carefully curated worlds left shattered, yet their most prized possessions remained. It was a taunt, a deliberate refusal to take what was expected, but now these new heists were rectifying that. They were gathering what the original killer had left behind, not out of oversight but by design. A puzzle meticulously crafted over years, now being assembled by someone else. Someone intimately familiar with the original killer's pathology, their intricate mind. Someone who understood the unspoken language of the crime scenes, an acolyte, a student, or worse, a successor. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered the internal debate years ago about whether the killer had ever worked alone. I had dismissed it, focused on the singular, brilliant evil I believed I was chasing. The thought gnawed at me, a bitter worm of self-doubt. My failure then wasn't just losing the killer, but perhaps overlooking the very person who now continued their work. The hauler's fear wasn't just of them, but of his master, the one pulling the strings, the one who understood the significance of each stolen artifact. Suddenly, a face flashed in my mind's eye, not the original killer's, a ghost I could never quite grasp, but another. A quiet, unassuming man, a researcher. He had approached me years ago during the height of the original investigation. He claimed to be an independent scholar, obsessed with the symbolism of the crimes. He knew details, obscure facts about the victims' collections, information that hadn't been publicly released. I had dismissed him as a morbid curiosity seeker, perhaps even a nuisance, eager for proximity to the macabre. He had even offered theories, abstract and complex, about the killer's true motive, which I, in my tunnel vision, had found too esoteric to consider. He had always been polite, almost deferential, yet his eyes held a strange, knowing glint. He had called my attention to the absence of the valuable artifacts from the original crime scenes, suggesting it was part of the killer's message, a deliberate omission that spoke volumes. He'd even hinted at a grand design that would only be revealed in time. I had thought he was projecting his own theories onto the killer, a common trait among armchair profilers. But what if he wasn't? What if he was the one who understood because he was the one planning, the researcher? His quiet intensity, his unnerving grasp of the original killer's methods, his almost academic fascination with the macabre. He hadn't been an observer, he had been an apprentice, or perhaps the true architect, pulling the strings even then, using the original as a proxy or as a test run. The heists were not just a mirror, they were a continuation, a horrifying second act. The motive wasn't just greed or even the twisted artistry of the original. It was about proving a point, completing a legacy, and mocking the one who failed to see it, me. My hands clenched into fists, gripped tight. He knew me, knew my methods, knew my failures. He had watched me then, and he was watching me now. The determination hardened in my eyes, replacing the self-reproach. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was personal, and I wouldn't let him finish his masterpiece. The bitter taste of defeat clung to my tongue, a phantom aftertaste of metal and dust. He was gone. The alley swallowed him whole, leaving behind only the ghost of his presence, a mocking void. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed from the futile chase, but it was the hollow ache in my chest that truly crippled me. I had been so close, had felt the truth shimmering on the edge of revelation, only for it to dissipate like smoke. The city lights blurred as I drove, a kaleidoscope of meaningless color. My hands gripped the steering wheel, gripped tight, the leather creaking under the strain. I had no map, no compass, only a gnawing certainty that this game was far from over. He wasn't just mirroring the past, he was playing with me. Hours bled into a desolate stretch of highway. My mind replayed the last encounter, every missed opportunity, every flicker of movement. I felt like a puppet on strings, dancing to an unseen hand's rhythm. The frustration was a raw wound, festering with each mile. I needed a lead, any thread to pull, or I risked unraveling completely. I found myself pulling into a sprawling expanse of cracked asphalt, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of sodium lamps. The truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m., wrong truck. It wasn't a chosen destination. It was a surrender, a place where the weary and the lost paused before continuing their endless journeys. Diesel fumes hung heavy in the frigid air, mingling with the faint smell of stale coffee and forgotten ambitions. Mammoth rigs, their engines idling with a deep, rhythmic sigh, lined the lot like sleeping behemoths. Why here? I couldn't say. Perhaps it was the sheer anonymity of the place, a corner of the world where one could disappear, or where one might expect to find something hidden in plain sight. My eyes scanned the rows of trucks, each a potential fortress of secrets. A blue Peterbilt, its chrome gleaming under a distant lamp, caught my attention. There was something about its pristine condition, an unnatural polish amidst the general grime of the lot that snagged at my frayed nerves. I maneuvered my vehicle closer, the crunch of gravel beneath my tires echoing in the pre-dawn quiet. The blue Peterbilt was parked at an odd angle, slightly askew from its neighbors, as if it had been left in a hurry. My heart, a drum against my ribs, quickened its beat. This was it. This had to be it. The perpetrator fleeing had left this behind, a clue, a taunt. The truck was locked, its windows tinted, reflecting my own distorted image back at me. I circled it, my gaze sweeping every seam, every panel. No visible signs of forced entry, no obvious message. Just a truck. A very clean, very out-of-place truck. Then I saw it. Tucked beneath the passenger side wiper blade, a small, unassuming envelope. Breath hitched. He knew I would come here. He knew I would find this particular truck. This wasn't a chase. It was a twisted invitation. My fingers trembled as I retrieved the envelope. It was thick, heavy stock, unmarked. Inside, there was no letter, no cryptic message. My world tilted. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. This wasn't just a locket. This was her locket. Sarah Jenkins, the third victim from my old case, the one that had shattered my career, my life. I remembered it with excruciating clarity. A small, oval piece of sterling silver, intricately engraved with a single, delicate rose. It had been missing from her possessions, never recovered. A detail I had obsessed over, a loose thread I could never tie down. Now here it was, untarnished, polished to a brilliant sheen as if freshly buffed. It wasn't just a locket, it was a direct punch to my gut, a sneering reminder of my failure. He hadn't just taken it, he had kept it. And now he was returning it, a macabre trophy presented directly to me. My mind raced, connecting the dots with a sickening jolt. The meticulous planning, the mirroring of the old methods, the vanishing acts. It wasn't just an homage, it was personal. This wasn't just about the victims, it was about me. He knew about Sarah's locket, a detail that had only been in the case files and in my own tortured memories. He knew my vulnerabilities, my specific failures. He had been watching me, dissecting my past, crafting this elaborate revenge. This wasn't a random serial killer. This was someone intimately familiar with the original case, someone who held a grudge, someone who wanted to make me suffer, not just by failing, but by witnessing the echoes of my failure up close and personal. I turned the locket over in my palm, its weight insignificant, yet crushing. The engraved rose seemed to mock me, its delicate petals a stark contrast to the brutal reality it represented. He was not just playing a game, he was setting the rules, choosing the arena, and making me the unwilling pawn. My head snapped up. Was he still here? Was this a trap? I scrambled back into my vehicle, fumbling for the ignition. The engine roared to life, a sudden cacophony in the quiet lot. My gaze darted frantically, trying to pinpoint the figure. He was gone again, swallowed by the vastness of the lot, leaving me alone with the silent accusation of the locket. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't the wrong truck at all. This was the truck. The specific, deliberate delivery mechanism for his message. He hadn't led me astray. He had led me exactly where he wanted me to be, to confront this personal relic of my past. A new kind of fire ignited within me, burning away the bitter defeat, leaving behind a hard, crystalline resolve. He wanted a game, he would get one, I would be hunting. And I would start by understanding how he knew about Sarah's locket. Who else knew that detail? Only a very select few, and one of them was about to become my next target. The stakes weren't just raised, they had become inextricably personal, woven into the very fabric of my being. I would find him not just for the victims, but for Sarah, and for the ghost of the man I used to be. The hunt had truly begun. The metallic tang of the night air, sharp and unforgiving, was a familiar companion now, a stark contrast to the bitter taste of recent failure. My lungs still ached from the futile sprint, a phantom burn that mirrored the hollow space where triumph should have resided. He had slipped away, a wraith in the Allah's embrace, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his taunting absence. But defeat, I reminded myself, was merely a precursor to recalibration. The hunt was not over, it had merely shifted its terrain. I spent the next day immersed in the archives of my own shame, poring over the cold cases, the ones that had led me down this winding, shadowed path. Each heist, meticulously detailed, each stolen item listed with an almost clinical detachment. For years, I had chased the obvious, the cash, the jewels, the high-value electronics. I'd seen a pattern of escalating boldness, of surgical precision, but the why remained a phantom. My eyes snagged on a recurring detail, a thread almost too fine to perceive. Not the main haul, never the main haul, but always a secondary item. A small crate, a specialized component, a seemingly insignificant box tucked away amidst the more valuable cargo. It wasn't money he was after, or power in the traditional sense. It was something far more specific, far more insidious. A rare earth mineral discreetly listed as a catalytic agent in one manifest, a refining additive in another. This was it, the missing piece. The heists weren't about the surface value, they were about the acquisition of very particular, very hard-to-trace elements. Elements that, in the wrong hands, could construct something truly devastating. He wasn't a common thief. He was a collector, building an arsenal of the unseen. My past failures weren't just about missing a killer, they were about misunderstanding his very nature. This knowledge, sharp and precise, honed my resolve. I wouldn't chase him this time, I would draw him out. I made the calls, leveraging old favors, twisting arms I hadn't touched in years. A former colleague, now working for a major freight company, owed me. He didn't ask too many questions, just grumbled about the risk and the paperwork. My plan was simple, brutal in its elegance. I would bait the hook with what he truly coveted. The setup was a carefully orchestrated ballet of misdirection. I arranged for a specific shipment a modest quantity of the rare mineral, disguised as a standard industrial chemical, to be transported through a route I knew he favored. I had a colleague from the local precinct, a detective I still trusted, pull strings to ensure minimal security on that particular run, making it an irresistible target. The air was thick with the scent of diesel, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of impending rain. Across the expanse of cracked asphalt, a dozen 18-wheelers slumbered, their chrome dulled by the sparse, orange glow of the lot's high-mounted lamps. Among them, 2 trucks stood out. The first was my obvious bait, a gleaming white rig, its trailer ostensibly loaded with the valuable mineral. I had ensured its location was just prominent enough to catch the eye, just secluded enough to feel vulnerable. This was the truck I wanted him to see, the one I had meticulously prepared for his arrival, complete with a silent alarm and a tracking device nestled within its chassis. The second truck, parked 100 feet away, was a nondescript, older model, its paint faded, its tires caked with the grime of countless journeys. It carried a load of ordinary lumber, nothing remarkable, nothing that would draw a second glance. Or so I thought. This was my contingency, my layer of doubt, born from the gnawing fear that I was still missing something. I watched the lot, my breath misting in the frigid air inside the sedan. The silence was punctuated only by the distant hum of the highway and the occasional creak of metal from the sleeping giants. Had I overplayed my hand? There was my understanding of his motive still flawed. The sheer audacity of his previous actions, the way he seemed to dance on the edge of capture, made me question every assumption. What if he saw through my ruse? What if he was already here watching me? The thought was a prickle on my skin. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, just as the light faded, a figure emerged from the deeper gloom near the perimeter fence. Tall, lean, moving with an unnerving economy of motion. My blood surged, a jolt of adrenaline that sharpened every sense. It was him. He moved with an almost predatory grace, a phantom weaving between the behemoths. My gaze was fixed, every nerve ending screaming. He approached the lot, not from the main entrance, but from the unlit, overgrown edge, just as I had anticipated. He paused, a silhouette against the distant glow of the highway, his head turning, surveying the scene. He saw my bait truck, I was sure of it. The gleaming white trailer, the subtle suggestion of vulnerability. My trap was set. He didn't head for the white truck. He walked past it, his stride unbroken, his gaze fixed elsewhere. My carefully constructed certainty began to unravel. No, this wasn't right. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. He continued his deliberate path, bypassing the obvious lure, ignoring the very cargo I had risked everything to present to him. He was heading not for the gleaming decoy, nor even for my supposed real bait with the rare mineral. He walked straight towards the wrong truck, the nondescript lumber hauler, the one I had dismissed as inconsequential. The faded, grubby rig that held nothing of value, nothing I had factored into his meticulous design. A sharp, icy wave of self-doubt washed over me. Had I been wrong all along? There was his true objective something else entirely. The air caught in my throat, a silent gasp of bewildered recognition. The lumber truck. Why the lumber truck? He hadn't just avoided my trap. He had exposed the fundamental flaw in my perception. He had slipped away a wraith, leaving only the ghost of a promise unfulfilled. But the ghost had left a scent, a whisper of a pattern that finally coalesced in the quiet, desperate calculus of my mind. It was the cadence of his retreats, the almost imperceptible hesitation before vanishing, a signature I dismissed as mere caution. Now it sang a different tune, not fear but expectation. He wasn't running from me, he was leading me. A puppet master pulling invisible threads. And the final thread, I realized with a jolt that cleared the fog of fatigue, led to a specific kind of desolation. I drove, a silent predator, through the skeletal sprawl of the city's outskirts, past the skeletal remains of forgotten industries, until the neon glow of a familiar sign bled across the asphalt. The air here was thick with the exhaust of long-haul dreams and the stale scent of cheap coffee. My headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the vast expanse of the truck stop parking lot. 2 a.m. Wrong truck. My breath hitched. My eyes scanned, searching for the specific model, the telltale dent, the faded company logo I'd glimpsed in the grainy surveillance feed. My target was a newer model, a gleaming beast of chrome and diesel. But there, parked at an odd angle, closer to the dilapidated diner than the fuel pumps, sat an older hauler. Its paint was chipped, a dull, rusted blue, a relic amongst the newer Titans. This was it, the wrong truck. A wave of unease washed over me. It was the same make and faded color as a truck from the original case, the one that had carried the last victim's belongings, found abandoned miles from the scene. A truck I'd dismissed as irrelevant, a mere coincidence. My gut twisted. He wasn't just mimicking, he was mocking. He was weaving my past failures into his present spectacle. The air was heavy, charged with an unspoken challenge. This wasn't a pursuit, it was an invitation. He was tall, lean, his silhouette familiar in its stark anonymity, yet utterly foreign in its context. It was the voice of a man who had waited a long time for this moment. I relate, and I, old friend, have them all. Old friend, the words hung in the air, a poisoned dart. My mind raced, sifting through faces, names, memories. Who among the ghosts of my past could wield such a subtle blade? Who are I demanded, stepping out from the meager cover of my vehicle, my gaze unwavering. He took a step forward, and the flickering light caught his features, twisting them into a grotesque mask of recognition and sorrow. It was the father of the last girl, the one whose disappearance had broken the original case wide open, the one whose devastated face I'd seen on countless news reports. The man I'd tried to comfort, whose grief I'd witnessed firsthand. The one I'd failed. The world tilted on its axis. This was impossible. He was a victim, a broken man. I remember, he said, his voice laced with a bitter satisfaction. Good, remembering makes this poetic. But why? The question tore from my throat, raw with the betrayal of memory. You who stood there, full of platitudes, while the monster walked free. You who saw the pattern, the signature, and dismissed it as coincidence. The one you missed. He stepped fully into the weak light, his eyes burning with an almost manic intensity. The one who orchestrated it all. The one who used the man you caught as a shield, a diversion, the evidence. The evidence I crafted for you, he interrupted, his voice rising, betraying the controlled calm he'd maintained. The crumbs I left, knowing your arrogance, your blind spots. The man you put away was a pawn, a useful idiot. My daughter was merely collateral damage in his pathetic game. But it was my failure to see the larger picture that condemned her, and me. The confession hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The original serial killer, the one I'd painstakingly tracked, the one whose capture had marked both the peak and the beginning of my downfall, was a decoy. A carefully placed red herring. All those years, I had been haunted by a ghost, while the true demon walked among us, meticulously planning this twisted retribution. You let him go, he accused, his voice a venomous hiss. You let him go, so I had to become him. I had to finish what he started, but with a purpose I would finally understand. He lunged, not with a weapon, but with the raw, untamed fury of years of simmering grief and carefully cultivated rage. He was faster than I expected, fueled by a terrifying desperation. My gun, suddenly heavy and cumbersome, was knocked from my hand, skittering across the asphalt and disappearing beneath a parked trailer. We collided, a desperate tangle of limbs and grunts. His hands, surprisingly strong, locked around my throat, pushing me back against the rusted side of the blue truck. The cold metal bit into my spine. The years had dulled my reflexes, but not my will to survive. This wasn't just about catching a killer anymore. It was about reclaiming a shred of my shattered past, about proving that my life, my pursuit, hadn't been a complete lie. A sharp pain bloomed in my side as he slammed me again into the truck, the impact jarring my teeth. I tasted blood, metallic and bitter, a familiar flavor in this cruel, endless night. He was stronger, fueled by a righteous fury I couldn't match, not yet. But I had to. The truth, now revealed, was a burning ember in my chest, demanding to be defended, to be avenged. The fight had only just begun. A sharp, metallic tang filled my mouth as my head struck something unforgiving. The world tilted, a kaleidoscope of harsh, fluorescent light from the truck stop canopy and the inky black of the distant sky. I fought back, clawing at his arms, kicking at his shins. His grip was like iron bands, squeezing the air from my lungs. We tumbled against the side of a parked rig, the cold metal biting through my jacket. The air was thick with the scent of diesel and stale coffee, a pungent cocktail of weariness and hidden menace. I tasted blood, hot and coppery, on my tongue. He grunted, a guttural sound of effort and rage, trying to pin me to end this. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, a momentary hesitation that wasn't there before, a chink in his armor of calculated cruelty. My hand scrabbled blindly, finding purchase on a loose pipe, perhaps a forgotten piece of equipment from the nearby repair bay. I yanked it, a desperate, clumsy movement, and swung. The pipe connected with a sickening thud against his temple. His grip slackened, his body momentarily rigid, then he slumped, a dead weight against me. We collapsed together onto the grimy asphalt of the truck stop parking lot, 2 a.m. wrong truck. The world spun for a moment, then slowly righted itself. I pushed myself away, my muscles screaming in protest, and scrambled to my knees, gasping for breath. The figure lay still, face turned towards the pale glow of a distant sign. Moonlight, weak and watery, painted his features in stark relief. It was the driver, the one who had shadowed me, the one with the eyes that held too much knowledge. My vision cleared, focusing on the details. A faint, almost imperceptible scar traced a line from his eyebrow to his hairline, barely visible beneath the sweat-matted hair. A memory, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of exhaustion. A file photo, yellowed with age, of a young man caught in the periphery of my old case, a witness who vanished. The scar wasn't in that photo, it was newer. His eyes fluttered open, locking onto mine. They were a message, weren't they, to finally see what I missed, to understand. He pushed himself up, leaning against the tire of the truck, his movements slow, deliberate. He taught me everything, the precision, the art of the vanishing act. He was a master, and I let him slip away. The words were a venomous sting aimed directly at the wound I'd carried for years. He was a monster, I growled, and I became just like him. No, he replied, shaking his head slowly. I perfected it. He was messy, impulsive. I am an architect. Every move, every tremor planned. The heists were the canvas. The fear was the paint, the bodies, just details. My stomach churned towards the dim, anonymous outline of the wrong truck, a generic delivery vehicle that held no significance beyond being a temporary backdrop for our confrontation. He left a legacy, a blueprint. I merely followed the instructions. And I, Cole, I was the only one who might understand. The only one who saw the patterns, even if I couldn't quite connect the dots then. I needed to see it now, to know it was real. He wasn't just mimicking the old killer, he was a disciple, a student who had surpassed his teacher, driven by a perverse need for recognition from the one man who had almost caught his idol. He wanted me to validate his work, to acknowledge the horrifying artistry of his crimes. Just then, the wail of sirens pierced the pre-dawn quiet, growing louder, closer. Red and blue lights began to paint the asphalt, sweeping across the parked rigs like an urgent, unholy dawn. The detective, the one who had always looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion, emerged from the first patrol cruiser. His face grim, his hand already on his sidearm. "Cole," he yelled, his voice cutting through the air. "Step away from him." I didn't move, my gaze locked on the driver. He had gotten what he wanted, my attention, my understanding, my validation. The resolution wasn't clean, it wasn't a triumphant victory. I felt the weight of years lift, replaced by an emptiness that wasn't quite despair, nor was it peace. It was simply the end. The hunt was over. The ghost was finally laid to rest, but not before spawning a new, more terrifying entity. I had proven myself, yes, but at what cost? The scars on my soul felt deeper, more intricate, etched by the very resolution I had sought. I slowly raised my hands, stepping away from the driver, away from the wrong truck, towards the approaching lights, a silent, weary surrender to the aftermath. The air still smelled of diesel, but now, beneath it, I could discern the faint, lingering scent of blood and closure.